The Heiress Who Stole a Billionaire's Heart Part 3. Chapter 13, The Assassins Close In. There are moments in history when silence turns deadly. The kind of silence that follows a bomb no one hears drop, a heartbeat too calm before it bursts, the breath that freezes before the scream. And that's exactly the moment Valentina Cruz found herself standing in. The air inside the Diamond Gala had fractured. Not just with murmurs and phone alerts, but with something ancient. Fear. High-profile guests huddled in private clusters, heads ducked over shimmering phones now pulsing with the name Valentina Cruz in encrypted digital ink. Security teams buzzed into motion, discreet but unmistakable. Men in tuxedos shifted their weight like predators. Hidden radios crackled under lapels. The room rippled, the illusion of wealth and glamour slowly peeling back to reveal its skeleton: politics, money, danger. At the center of it all stood Jules, still wearing the skin of Caspian lock, with a champagne flute in one hand and betrayal tightening around his throat. Valentina hadn't moved. She watched him absorb the chaos. His eyes scanned the crowd like a war strategist, not for enemies, but for escape routes. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He was calculating. And that, more than anything, terrified her. But there was no time to think. Not really. Because somewhere in the growing static of the room, something else had entered. Something colder. Across the gallery floor, a man slipped past the perimeter line. No one noticed him at first. He wasn't the sort of person people saw. His suit was perfect but generic, his face forgettable by design. He moved like mist around the waitstaff, with a tray balanced expertly in one hand and nothing but death in his eyes. He wasn't security. He wasn't a guest. He was a contractor. And he was here to kill Caspian Lock. Jules felt it before he saw it, that instinct he'd developed after years of being a stand-in for someone with too many enemies. The chill at the base of his skull. The shift in air pressure. The way his shoulder blades tensed when eyes were on his back that didn't want to see him, but erase him. He turned just in time to see the man reaching beneath the tray. A silenced pistol. Jules reacted before thought. He dropped the champagne, grabbed Valentina by the waist, and yanked her off the platform with him, just as the first suppressed shot split the air with a whisper of violence. The bullet tore through the diamond sculpture. Shards exploded like shrapnel. The crowd erupted. Guests screamed and scattered, heels clattering across marble, security shouting over radios. The assassin fired again, aiming low, methodical, trained. He wasn't shooting to wound. He was shooting to end. Valentina rolled across the floor beside Jules, gown torn, the taste of terror sharp in her mouth. "What the hell is happening?" she gasped, heart jackhammering. "Someone thinks I'm him," Jules said grimly, pulling her to her feet. "Aren't you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed her hand and ran. They barreled through the back hallways of the Palais, weaving between service carts and broken glass. Staff cowered behind curtain partitions, guards shouted contradictory orders into their radios, and behind them, footsteps. The assassin wasn't far. He had ditched the tray and moved like a machine, silent and focused. If this man had a name, it didn't matter. He'd been paid in crypto and war stories, not morality. He was going to kill Caspian Lock. Or the man wearing his name. They ducked into a side corridor, slammed through a maintenance door, and found themselves in the underbelly of the building, marble traded for concrete, chandeliers for flickering fluorescent lights. Jules pressed her against the wall, both of them breathing hard. Valentina's hands were cut from the diamond shards, her lipstick smeared across her cheek. She looked like an angel after a car crash. "What the hell did you upload?" Jules demanded, his breath hot with adrenaline. "The truth," she said, chest heaving. "I exposed Drake." Jules swore. "That wasn't just information," he snapped. "That was a declaration of war." She stared at him, blood on her fingers, and said, "Then why are you still holding my hand?" Footsteps again. Closer. A sharp clang of a metal object, maybe a clip reloading. Jules grabbed a fire extinguisher and hurled it down the hall. The assassin's silhouette flinched, weapon raised just long enough for Jules to pull Valentina through another door, this one leading into the catering bay. Steam. Heat. Steel countertops. Knives hanging in rows. Jules grabbed one. "Do you even know how to use that?" she whispered. "No," he said. "But if he gets close enough to ask, we're already dead." They sprinted through the kitchen, crashing through the back exit just as the killer reached the threshold. A bullet pinged off a pot rack, slicing through open air. Valentina screamed. They reached the loading bay. Empty. No guards. No witnesses. Just the rain again, falling over sleek black cars and puddles full of light. Jules yanked open the rear door of a catering van, shoved her inside, and followed. He slammed it shut behind them and ducked just as another shot slammed into the van's bumper. For 5 seconds, they didn't move. Then Jules whispered, "Stay down." He crawled forward, reached the driver's seat, hot-wired the ignition with fingers slick from sweat, and peeled away from the gala with tires screeching like banshees. In the rearview mirror, the assassin stepped into the open, watching them escape with no emotion on his face at all. Just patience. Valentina pressed her head against the cold van wall, heart thundering. Jules looked back once, eyes meeting hers in the mirror. "That was just the beginning," he said, voice like steel. And for the first time, Valentina realized. They weren't just playing with fire anymore. They were running from it. Chapter 14, Betrayal in Brushstrokes. The escape from the Diamond Gala had left the Sovereign floating in silence, anchored just beyond Cap Ferret, cloaked beneath a digital fog net that hid its location from satellites and heat maps. The yacht drifted like a ghost, luxurious, lethal, and quietly teetering on the edge of collapse. Inside, everything had changed. Jules hadn't spoken since the van. He hadn't yelled, hadn't accused, hadn't even touched her. Which was worse? Silence from a man who lived in masks was louder than rage. Valentina moved through the ship like a sleepwalker, bruised, bleeding, her stolen key still hidden in the studio. They didn't trust each other anymore. But neither had left. That, somehow, was more dangerous than the assassin. The next evening, the final event of the gala was rescheduled, a live-streamed virtual panel featuring Valentina's curated art installation. The broadcast would be viewed by over 300,000 attendees across private networks in Zurich, Dubai, and Singapore. Guests who hadn't made it to Monaco were desperate to see the infamous artist behind the chaos. And Lock Industries, whether they liked it or not, had its name attached. The board had insisted the segment go on. Restore the image. Stabilize the brand. Keep her smiling. Jules hadn't agreed to it. But Caspian, the real Caspian, had sent a single, cryptic message to Jules through the blackline comms. Let the world see what she thinks she knows. So they did. Valentina sat in the center of the glass studio as technicians configured the live stream. A camera drone hovered silently above, capturing every angle of her. She wore a structured white blazer over tailored silk trousers, minimal jewelry, red lips, the uniform of defiance. Jules stood in the background, arms folded, face carved from stone. She hadn't told him everything. He hadn't asked. But she could feel him unraveling from 20 feet away. Good. Maybe that meant the truth was finally catching up with both of them. The gallery projection began. Across massive digital screens, in homes, private viewing parties, secure conference rooms around the globe, her 4 paintings bloomed into view, each one larger than life, rich with depth and motion, projected in ultra-definition. A robotic voice narrated the artistic concept, a standard PR script. An exploration of data as myth. A meditation on the commodification of identity. Cruz's brushwork mimics algorithmic loops. Her use of shadow overlays references surveillance culture but the script faltered. Because something unexpected happened. The 4th painting, her last and most recent piece, the one she'd modified in secret, began to glitch. The image stuttered. Lines of code flickered beneath the pigment like cracks beneath a facade. Then the painting expanded beyond its digital frame. It wasn't just a landscape anymore. It was a schematic. Across the globe, viewers leaned in. Technicians blinked in confusion. Board members gasped. And Jules stepped forward in horror. Because he recognized what was being revealed. Drake. The glitch wasn't accidental. Valentina had embedded a live code trigger into the canvas file, a visual cipher that, when scanned at high resolution by streaming software, unlocked a buried algorithm. What had once been abstract art was now a slowly unspooling map of lock industry's most classified research. Lines formed patterns. Patterns formed loops. Loops revealed subroutines. Predictive behavioral manipulation. Geo-targeted synthetic news bursts. Real-time emotional influence simulations. The voiceover cut out. The stream went silent. And then, in a cold digital whisper, text appeared on every screen. Art imitates life. But data rewrites it. This is your future. And you've already funded it. Valentina Cruz. Chaos erupted in real time. Board members began shouting into phones. Investors called for emergency sessions. Governmental clients pulled feeds. One of the Tokyo hosts fainted. The veil was gone. Inside the studio, Valentina stood slowly, turning toward Jules. I told you, she said quietly, I wanted the world to know the truth. Jules stepped forward, his hands clenched at his sides. You broadcast the inner engine of the most dangerous program on Earth. Do you realize what you've done? Yes, she said. I've exposed a machine that ruins lives in silence. You've put a target on your back the size of a nation. She met his gaze, defiant. I've already been hunted. The difference now is, I'm not hiding anymore. A burst of static lit up Jules's comms. Tarek's voice crackled through. Sir. We've got a breach. Not local. Digital. Real Caspian's system just activated an inbound relay. What kind of relay? Jules demanded. Hardline transfer. Something's coming, from him. Valentina heard it. Her spine stiffened. The real Caspian. He's watching. Jules turned to her, jaw tight. He's always been watching. But it was too late. The projection system, now hacked by Caspian himself, flickered once more. A video began to play. Not of Drake. Not of Data. But of Valentina. Clips, pulled from surveillance, her breaking into the archive room. Her painting in the studio. Her slipping the key from his jacket. Her hands placing the device behind the canvas. All from different angles. From hidden eyes she hadn't seen. Her betrayal, in full view. The world saw her expose Caspian's empire. And now, the world would see her mask fall too. Jules turned to her, face stricken. "You played them," he whispered. "You played me." Valentina froze. "I had to." "You wanted to." She reached for him, but he stepped back. Behind her, the screen blazed with her face. Framed in betrayal. Trapped in brushstrokes. Chapter 15, Public Unmasking. Some stories end in silence. Others end in fire. But this one, for all its disguises and deceit, began unraveling beneath a sky full of light, with the world watching, live. The broadcast hadn't been meant for the public. Valentina's art reveal, and her embedded leak of the Drake schematics, was supposed to be limited to a curated list of elite investors, corporate partners, and high-clearance observers. But Caspian Locke, the real one, had rewritten the rules. The moment her embedded code activated and her name bloomed across the screens, he flipped the firewall failsafe. And with it, the entire stream, coded under Locke Art Gala, was mirrored into the public domain. Within 5 minutes, it hit private feeds in Zurich. 6 minutes, Twitter. 7, CNN. By the 10th minute, it was streaming live to 2 million viewers across the world. They watched as Valentina Cruz, dressed in white like a prophet or a criminal, stood surrounded by her own paintings. They watched as her encrypted art dissolved into neural network diagrams and behavioral programming code. They watched as the truth spread like wildfire, and then mutated into something else entirely. Because then, the footage began. The first clip was subtle, a silent reel of Valentina moving through the sovereign's studio, painting. Just painting. But then it cut, jump cuts, security cam angles, showing her reaching into drawers, unlocking cabinets, extracting encrypted data drives. Jules' voice from the security feed, "Someone's been in the archives." Another cut. Valentina slipping the key into her robe. A close-up of her sketchbook with clear traces of code structured into visual form. And finally, a frame-by-frame playback of the moment she uploaded the data during the gala. A split screen appeared, on one side, her exposing Locke Industries. On the other, her deception. Jules stood paralyzed in the center of the glass studio, eyes locked on the screen above. He looked like a man stabbed in slow motion. Valentina turned to him, breathless, trembling, yet unrepentant. "You knew I was lying," she said, voice raw. "But I still told the truth." "And you think that matters now?" he hissed. "They saw everything. You betrayed me." "You're not even the person I betrayed," she fired back. A breath passed between them. Cold. Cracked. That was when the doors exploded open. 2 men in tactical gear surged into the studio, weapons drawn, faces masked. Not Jules' private security, but something different. Hired. Ruthless. Precise. Valentina ducked instinctively. Jules tackled her behind the main pedestal. A bullet shattered the overhead screen, raining sparks and glass like a meteor storm. The unmasking had triggered a response. Not from police. Not from shareholders. But from the people who stood to lose everything. The board. The architects of Drake. And perhaps, the real Caspian Lock himself. Valentina crawled behind a column, heart pounding. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her body stayed low, alert. Jules crouched beside her, breathing hard, bleeding from a graze to the shoulder. You were the distraction, he said. You were the lie. And now they're coming for both of us. In the chaos of gunfire and shattering art, another image appeared across the fractured projection walls. A pre-recorded message. Glitchy. Flickering. The real Caspian. Face half in shadow. No background. No traceable timestamp. You've both played your parts well. But the stage is collapsing. You've exposed the story, and become it. There are no clean exits anymore. Only choices. Then the feed cut. The attackers closed in. Jules grabbed a fallen camera mount and swung it like a club, knocking one to the floor. Valentina lunged for the weapon, too slow. A second man raised his gun at her chest. But then, Tarek appeared from behind a crumbling partition, firing 2 clean shots. The man dropped instantly. Tarek turned to Jules. You're both blown. We've got 5 minutes, maximum. Jules pulled Valentina to her feet. The mask was gone. The charm gone. The lie gone. Now there were only 2 fugitives, bleeding and breathless, standing in the wreckage of their own creation. You wanted the world to see the truth, he said bitterly. She looked up at him, eyes burning. They just did. And somewhere in a bunker, far from Monaco, the real Caspian Lock leaned back in his chair and watched as the 2 people who had once been his weapons, became his liabilities. Or perhaps, his final gamble. Chapter 16, Yacht Escape. The sky above Monaco burned gold with sirens. From the hilltop balconies of the old town to the glittering decks of idle superiors, a storm of flashing lights and screeching news bulletins painted the night in chaos. The Diamond Gala Massacre, as the headlines would soon call it, was unfolding in real time. Helicopters circled low, spotlights slicing across the coastline. Police drones screamed overhead. And in the shadows of the smoking Bellacourt Palais, Valentina Cruz and Jules Carradine ran for their lives. They bolted through the marble loading corridor, bloodied and breathless, ducking past catering carts and broken security barriers. Tarek sprinted ahead, guiding them toward the rear docks, one hand pressed to his earpiece, the other gripping a short-range signal jammer. Marina's locked down, he said through clenched teeth. We have 4 minutes before maritime patrols sweep the water. Jules didn't answer. He was dragging Valentina by the wrist, blood soaking through the sleeve of his torn tuxedo, pain pulsing from his shoulder wound. His face, Caspian's face, was caught somewhere between rage and resolve. Valentina was half running, half stumbling. Adrenaline had drowned her fear, but not her guilt. Not the image of Jules looking at her, not like a lover, but like a man watching a building collapse with himself inside it. They burst onto the loading dock, a private marina beneath the cliffside estate, where luxury speedboats floated like sharks in waiting. A half-dozen armed guards lay unconscious or worse, dropped by Tarek's silent team. One boat waited at the far end, black hull, twin engines, matte exterior to avoid reflection. Jules jumped in first, yanking Valentina behind him as Tarek detached the mooring with brutal efficiency. Head west, Tarek barked. Get out of Monaco's airspace and into open waters. the sovereigns still offshore and masked. If you make it to the drop point, but he didn't finish. Behind them, footsteps pounded across the dock. Shots fired. The roar of approaching motorbikes, board security, not police. Jules punched the throttle. The boat launched into the black water like a fired bullet. Valentina collapsed into the passenger seat as sea spray hit her face. Jules gritted his teeth, muscles clenched as he dodged boys, maneuvering between idle yachts and anchored pleasure cruisers, all while avoiding the beams of drone spotlights overhead. They were being chased by three things at once: law, legacy, and lies. Valentina wiped blood from her cheek with trembling fingers. They know everything now. No, Jules snapped. They know pieces. Caspian made sure of that. She looked at him sideways. So you're still protecting him? I'm protecting you, he said, eyes still locked on the waves. That stopped her. The boat hit a crest and lifted, then slammed back down. Behind them, another vessel peeled away from the docks in pursuit, white-hulled and fast, with a private security flag. Jules cursed and cranked the throttle to maximum. Up ahead, the Sovereign shimmered into view, hidden just outside the patrol grid. It wasn't broadcasting. Its lights were off. Its signature buried under noise. It looked like a floating ghost in the moonlight. Their only safe haven. A bright light scanned their path from overhead. A drone. Drop low. Jules yelled. Valentina ducked. He swerved hard, cutting behind a larger moored yacht. The pursuing drone couldn't adjust in time and collided with a mast. A spark of light and metal spiraled into the sea. But the second boat behind them wasn't slowing. They could hear it now, the guttural growl of twin engines catching up. Valentina turned to grab something, anything, and found a velvet box wedged beneath her seat. Instinctively, she opened it. A diamond. Not just any, the diamond from the shattered sculpture. It had somehow been scooped into the boat with them during the escape. Flawless. Massive. Worth more than her father's name before it was ruined. Jules glanced down. You brought a souvenir, he snapped. It's a symbol, she muttered, staring at it. A lie carved into light. And then, without thinking, she stood, turned, and threw it overboard. The wind caught her hair, the sea wind roaring as the stone arced into the dark, glinting once in moonlight before it disappeared beneath the waves. Gone. Just like everything else they'd once believed in. They reached the Sovereign moments later. Ramps lowered automatically. Tarek's team, already aboard, activated countermeasures, blinding spotlights, sonar disruptors, a coded signal that triggered the yacht's escape protocol. As Jules guided the speedboat into the belly of the yacht, Valentina looked back. Monaco glowed behind them, gilded, furious, frantic. But what she saw wasn't beauty. It was a bonfire. Lit by secrets. Inside the yacht, they staggered to the command deck. Alarms were silenced. Lights dimmed. Tarek appeared beside them. Caspian's real comm line just went dark. So we're alone? Jules asked. Yes. Until he decides we're not. Valentina slumped into a leather seat. Her hands still smelled like sea salt and oil paint. Her entire body ached. Her heart, somehow, more. Jules looked at her, finally, truly looked at her. I should throw you overboard, he said. She met his gaze. I should have let you get shot. A beat of silence. Then they both smiled, dark, bitter smiles, like enemies who had bled for each other without knowing why. Somewhere, beneath the waves, a diamond rested on the ocean floor. Worthless now. Because the only thing that mattered anymore was survival. And whatever came next. Chapter 17, Trust Built on Ruins. The sea held them for hours before letting go. The Sovereign sliced through open waters, invisible to radar and immune to signals. Its engines whispered instead of roared, its systems guided by silence rather than speed. As Monaco vanished into the horizon, all that remained was a dark ribbon of waves, and the two people who had destroyed everything they touched. Jules didn't speak. Valentina didn't ask him to. There was nothing left to say in the moment after war, only the sound of breath, the hum of betrayal, and the haunting knowledge that trust, once cracked, never quite sealed the same way again. The destination wasn't a plan. It was a memory. A tiny island off the Ligurian coast, uninhabited, except for a crumbling villa surrounded by ancient pines and wild rosemary. The land had been purchased decades ago by Locke Industries under a different name, and had once served as a secret art retreat for visiting billionaires and their muses. But the billionaires had grown bored, and the muses had vanished. Now, the island sat forgotten, perfect for people who needed to disappear. They arrived just before dawn. The sky was ash and pearl, stretched wide over cliffs still heavy with dew. Seabirds circled. The smell of salt clung to the wind like grief. Tarek docked the Sovereign quietly and handed Jules a sleek black duffel, passports, burner phones, a firearm, and cash in multiple currencies. "We'll be in international waters. You have 6 hours before the drone grid reboots." Jules nodded. "You'll circle back. If you're alive," Tarek replied. "Then, good luck, sir." He didn't look at Valentina. She didn't blame him. They hiked inland through a tangle of brush and silence. Jules carried the bag. Valentina carried herself. They said nothing until they reached the villa, a Mediterranean relic with ivy-wrapped walls, arched windows, and the ghosts of too many secrets. Inside, the air was stale with old oil paints and disuse. The power still worked. So did the espresso machine. There was even a half-broken telescope on the upper balcony. As if the place had been waiting for someone to remember it. It wasn't until they sat down, in 2 cracked leather chairs facing the sea, that truth began to rise. Jules rested the gun on the table, unloaded. Valentina stared at it. "That meant for me." "No," he said. "It's for anyone else who tries to find us." A pause. Then, without turning, he asked. "Why didn't you just take me down? The moment you had the data. You could have walked away. You could have left me." Valentina inhaled slowly. "I almost did." She ran a hand through her hair, suddenly exhausted. "But I didn't know if I was walking away from a monster, or a man who didn't know he was wearing the monster's face." Jules stood, paced once. "You think I don't know what I am? I've spent 2 years living in another man's skin. Caspian Locke made me his decoy, his human firewall, his scapegoat, and I said yes because I was poor, ambitious, and stupid enough to believe I'd stay clean." He turned toward her, eyes blazing. "I didn't ruin your father, Valentina. But I stood on the balcony and watched it happen. I toasted investors with someone else's voice. I signed contracts I didn't read. I let people vanish. I helped build this." His hands shook. And then his voice broke. "I didn't know it would feel like drowning." She was quiet for a long time. "Then, you think I wanted revenge for a company?" He looked at her. I wanted revenge because I sat next to my father as he poured brandy into a teacup and said, "At least I made something." He was crying, but he wouldn't say the word ruined. And I realized then, no one would ever tell our story. Not the truth of it. Her throat tightened. He died trying to protect his legacy. And I survived knowing the world thought he was a thief. They were quiet for a long time after that. Birds passed overhead. Somewhere in the villa, a shutter clanged open. Eventually, Jules sat down again. "You weren't the only one used," he said. "No," she whispered. "We both were." They looked at each other then. Really looked. Not as enemies, not as lovers. Not as avatars of vengeance and guilt. But as two ruined people clinging to the last shard of something that looked like understanding. Later, they sat on the balcony, watching the horizon for ships that might come too close. They shared espresso. She cleaned the cut on his shoulder. He wrapped her bruised fingers. No apologies. No promises. Just presence. That was enough. For now. As the sun rose, Valentina finally asked. "What happens when the real Caspian comes for us?" Jules didn't hesitate. "Then we stop running." Chapter 18, A Billionaire in Exile. The sun rose over the Ligurian Sea like a secret being reluctantly confessed. For the first time in days, the world outside felt still. Too still. No alarms. No engines. No choppers. Just waves kissing rock, breeze through pine, and two fugitives pacing the edge of an ancient villa like ghosts in borrowed time. Inside, Jules Carradine sat at the dining table, the battered comms device spread out before him like a confession waiting to be made. It had been silent since the escape. But that silence wouldn't last. He stared at the encrypted interface, the only remaining tether to the man who had erased him, the real Caspian lock. Valentina stood across the room, arms folded, watching. "Do it," she said softly. Jules hesitated. Then tapped the connection. The screen flickered. No title, no greeting. No identifying marks. Just a voice, and a face, and a truth long overdue. Caspian Locke appeared like a revenant from a higher world, his skin pale, thinner than Jules remembered, eyes sunken and lined with wear. The scar under his jaw had deepened. An foredrip was visible beside his chair, disappearing into his forearm. Behind him, the gleaming interior of the Icelandic bunker. And yet, for the first time, he looked human. Weakened. But in control. "I knew you'd reach out," he said, his voice flat, but softer than before. Jules didn't move. "We didn't have a choice." "No," Caspian said. "You made a choice. And I respect that." A silence passed between them. Then, Caspian sighed, a slow, mechanical sound. "I don't have much time left, Jules. You should know that." Jules stiffened. "Define much." "Months. Maybe weeks. The condition's genetic. Accelerated by overexposure to the interface fields we built. You know those experimental neurological relays. Turns out they were designed to outlive everyone, except the man who designed them." He gave a small, grim smile. "Poetic." Valentina moved into frame, her gaze sharpened. "So you're dying. That doesn't explain why you've left the world in the hands of a body double." Caspian tilted his head. "Because I was never meant to live past the structure." She frowned. "What structure?" Locke Industries was always a vehicle, not a monument. The company exists to push the world to the brink of technological singularity. To find the edge, and lean over it. I knew I wouldn't survive that edge. He looked at Jules now. That's why I built you. Jules said nothing. His jaw clenched. His heart thudded. All this time, all the silence, all the secrecy, and now it was being dropped at his feet like an heirloom he never asked to inherit. You were supposed to be a mask, Caspian said. But you grew into something more. You lived inside the fire and didn't blink. You navigated threats I never anticipated. You adapted. And now you want me to what? Jules said. Just keep wearing your name after you die. Become your legacy. I want you to decide what the legacy is, Caspian replied. The silence that followed wasn't stunned. It was clarifying. Valentina stepped forward. And what about the people you destroyed on the way to that legacy? Caspian looked at her. I've watched you since your first painting hit the docks of Monaco. You're dangerous because you want the truth to hurt. That makes you valuable. Valentina's expression was cold. That makes you a sociopath. Perhaps, he said. But I'm dying. And men like me don't die without a plan. He turned back to Jules. Here's what I'm offering. When the time comes, I'll upload my exit protocol, the formal death of Caspian Locke. You'll receive the asset keys, the facial deactivation rights, and full executive control of the shell corporations. Everything becomes yours. Why me? Jules asked. Why not someone who actually wants it? Because you don't. And that's the only kind of person who might use it right. Valentina touched Jules's shoulder. You don't have to do this. He looked at her, and saw the truth she couldn't say aloud, don't become him. But Jules already knew something she didn't. He already was becoming him. And if he didn't take the reins, someone worse would. He turned back to the screen. Send me the protocol. Caspian nodded. It's already en route. Oh, and Jules. Yeah. When the world thinks I'm gone, you'll have one final task. What's that? To decide if the world deserves to survive the machine we built. The screen flickered once, then went dark. Outside, the sun burned low over the cliffs, casting long shadows. Jules stood at the threshold of the villa, comms device in hand. Valentina came to his side. He made you a god, she said quietly. He shook his head. No. He made me a mirror. Neither of them said the rest aloud. That mirrors don't just reflect. They fracture. Because every broken heart deserves a comeback. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional romance every week. Hit like, drop a comment, and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of betrayal, redemption, and powerful love. And don't keep the drama to yourself. Share this story with someone who lives for twists just like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is becoming unforgettable.